Let me say that again. We are recording. We are so glad that you are here this evening, and we want to thank Abba for creating Covenant Calendar Club and the restoration of all things. We pray that you'll be richly blessed out of the word of the Torah and out of the mouth of our teachers this evening. But before we get started, we'd like to give a greeting and a warm shout out to those that are viewing this on YouTube. So can we take just a minute, everyone, unmute your mics, and let's just shout out a shalom blessing. Blessings, everyone.
Shalom.
Glad you're here.
Blessings to
Everybody.
Hallelujah.
Welcome.
We are truly glad that you're here. And if you'd like to participate in or with Covenant Calendar Club and our discussions afterwards, you can view studythecalendar.com and hook up right from there. So with that being said, let's go ahead and turn the camera over to Tim Ashelford, who's going to be our instructor for this evening, in addition to the Ruach HaKodesh, of course.
Yeah, well said, Mario. Well said. Thanks, Mario. Appreciate this. Welcome, everybody. It's going to be an interesting one tonight. This is very exciting for me. Stacy, I want to thank you very much for the prayer. I do appreciate that. Charlene, I want to thank you. This is the end of the slide. I got to back this up. Charlene, I got to thank you for all the work that you have done. It's an incredible amount of work, and I greatly, greatly appreciate it. This is part 2, and we're going to do a very, very, very small little bit of review, and then we're going to jump right into it. It's I'm looking forward to this in a big way. This study is so invigorating for me when I go through it. It just sends chills down my spine. And this is the basic pre-summary from part 1. Yahuah's requirements thus far. Number 1, enter the land. Number 2, observe Passover, and that would be Abib 14. Cut the first wheat, the wave sheaf offering. That's Abib 15. Roast and grind wheat. Prepare a flour and oil mixture, and that would most certainly be fine flour as recorded in the scriptures, or as required, I should say. Number 5, present the ascent offering by fire to Yahuah. And that ascent is emphasized for a very special reason. Number 6, break bread dough for normal consumption, bake bread dough for normal consumption. And number 7, eat the grain of the land. Only after the wave sheaf and the ascension offerings had been presented was it acceptable to Yahuah to consume the first grain of the land. Joshua 5:11. And they ate. Very important words. The order of events for Yahusha's crucifixion. So we have the Passover, and that is in the midst of the week. That's when the crucifixion was, and that's in Abib 14. Abib 15 is the first Shabbat of unleavened bread. The 16th is prepare for Shabbat. And Abib 17 is the 7th day Sabbath, the resurrection, and the 4th watch with Miriam. Now, this is why we're looking at this. Number 5. This is the wave sheaf at dawn. This is the topic of the day right now. The wave sheaf at dawn, the first cycle after the 7th day Sabbath. Yahusha ascends to his Father to fulfill the wave sheaf first fruit offering. And there's the 21st. That is the second unleavened bread Shabbat. Passover festival ends right there. And we look on the 24th. That is the next 7th day Sabbath outside of the Passover festival. And the 25th of the month is the first cycle outside of Passover festival. That is the first cycle of the week outside of the Passover festival. This date will be investigated next, the 26th. The 26th is a very controversial number, and you're going to be hearing a lot about that in this study. Number 5, again, Yahusha's wave sheaf and ascension was at dawn, the first cycle after the seventh-day Sabbath. Adding in Enoch's wave sheaf information. This is some thoughts to question. Number 9 on your right-hand side. The second cycle is a Monday, and it is outside of the Passover festival, and that is the 26th of Abib, right there. If Enoch has a true calendar, does Yahusha still have to request a 9-cycle extension so he could offer himself as another first fruit offering from death on Enoch 26th date of the month? Note, during Yahusha's Passion Week, this is a Monday, the second cycle of the week. How is this in alignment with the Enoch calendar that submits the wave sheaf must be on a Sunday, the 26th, and not Monday, the 26th? Just to show a little bit of there's some confusion in the Enoch calendar here. And we're going to be looking at this a bit deeper, quite a bit deeper, actually. Yahusha's antitype, is it based on Enoch's sickle? Very good question. The answer is going to be seen coming up. And here in part 2, this is the mapping of the discussion of the topics. Slides 2 to 11, we're going to see the review of part number 1 and the introduction for part number 2, section 3. What about the manna? Very good question. I think there's going to be a few surprises in this section. Section 4, the condition of Enoch's bread offering. And 4.1, divine life of the wave sheaf bread. And section 5, Yahusha and the wave sheaf placement. Was it Torah or Enoch? And then section 5.1, Yahusha, the perfect first fruit offering. Passover, wave sheaf, and unleavened bread. Okay, here's a bit of a review, and here's more on Enoch's wave sheaf date. And if you look in that square box, you'll see it says the first month, the 26th of the month, which they name it first fruits, the waving of the sheaf offering. The wave sheaf was to be offered on the 26th of the first month, and this is every year, period. It does not change in the Enoch and Zadok calendars. We're going to look and see if this is scriptural. Here's our introduction. Under Moses, only 2 Passovers were celebrated. There was likely no grain in the desert those 40 years. Just imagine what it must have been like to finally smell the new grain and touch it. One of my favorite aromas is at fall time when you see all the combines going through the fields and there's lots of dust in the air. That is such a beautiful aroma. I absolutely, the smell of harvest time. It's fabulous. In Egypt, unleavened bread was to be eaten with the Passover meal. Some feel Joshua allowed the people to process the old grain in order to have unleavened bread for the Passover meal, saving the new grain for the wave sheaf. Is this so? We're going to have a look at this, and I think we'll be able to answer that quite clearly. Remember the command of Leviticus 23:14. And you, what? Do not eat 1, bread, 2, roasted grain, 3, fresh grain. This command includes old and new grain, barley and wheat. So on their Passover, they had manna for Passover. One more time for Joshua. Section number 3. just when did the manna cease? And this is some more review. Israel enjoys the grain. And they ate of the stored grain of the land on the morrow after the Pesach, unleavened bread and roasted grain on the same day. And that day would be Abib 15, that is the first convocation of unleavened bread. John 5:12. Now we're wondering when the manna stopped. Let's read it. And the manna ceased on the day after they had eaten of the stored grain of the land. And the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land in Canaan that year. So the manna ceased on the day after they ate the grain. For Israel, who ate the grain of the land on Abib 15, there would be no reason to look for manna on Abib 16, the second cycle of the week. What about Enoch's calendar? Do you remember Enoch's quote? The first of the month, or the first month, the 20th of the month, was his first fruits and the waving of the sheaf offering, according to Enoch. The Sickle harvest, as claimed by Enoch's calendar, asserts the wave sheaf offering of first fruits, or the count to the Shavuot, cannot be performed until Abib 26, hungry or not. And that word hungry has high importance. We're going to be looking at this. While Joshua was quite able to fulfill the Torah's requirements concerning the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the rules of Enoch's calendar would have prevented Joshua from obedience to Yahuah, causing everyone to sin as well. And the question, how hungry would they have been having to wait till Abib 26 to eat and enjoy any of the harvest? They would have been hungry, in my estimation. This is Enoch's dilemma, not Joshua's. Enoch's harvest could not begin until Abib 26. Enoch's people could not eat any grain until the Abib 26 harvest begins. And we read in that verse that they're not to eat any grain whatsoever. So what is Enoch going to do between the time that Joshua ate the grain on the 15th of Abib and Abib 26? Where is Enoch going to get his food to feed people? Enoch could not eat unleavened bread as commanded by Yahuah during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Why? Because there was no grain and no manna. Why no grain? Because Yahuah had commanded that the grain was not to be eaten until the wave sheaf was performed. And Enoch says that can't happen until the 26th. So there was no grain to be eaten, and yet Joshua ate the grain on Abib 15 and the manna stopped afterwards. So there was no grain and no manna for Enoch. Enoch could only claim Abib 15 for eating manna. Then what? Hunger? Would that be one day of Feast of Unleavened Manna for unleavened bread? Remember, on Abib 16 is when the manna stopped. It just didn't show up. So there is your one day that Enoch could have eaten manna for unleavened bread. Does Enoch believe that people should have been tempted by Yahuah to abstain from the coveted grain, which they had not eaten for 40 years, for 11 more days before they could begin Enoch's harvest and satisfy their hunger? How many statutes have been broken thus far? Section number 4. If Joshua observed the wave sheaf festival according to Enoch's calendar, what would be the condition of the bread if not offered until Abib 26? And more specifically, what kind of problem will this create? We know there was a restriction for eating grain of any kind until after the wave sheaf had been presented. That's why Joshua performed the wave sheaf according to statute, so they could eat the first batch of bread dough on Abib 15, and that would be the morrow after the seventh-day Sabbath, or the Shabbat. The people were then allowed to freely use the grain of the land, only after the wave sheaf ceremony had been performed first. Note, Yahuah stipulated by statute the wave sheaf ceremony must occur on the first cycle of the week, the day after the seventh-day Sabbath. And here's a surprise. Enoch does abide by this stipulation with Joshua and Torah truth to some degree. There's your Shabbat. There is the wave sheaf. Enoch declares it to be on the first day after the seventh-day Sabbath. However, there is another problem to consider. What is the difference between Enoch and Joshua? It's the difference between a date and or a day. Those are two very, very distinguished, separate identities. And this is the difference, and it becomes brutally important to understand the difference. A date and or a day are usually not the same. Here's a random example. The 15th day of the first month is not always on a fifth cycle or a Wednesday, like it is on Enoch's calendar. Joshua knew Torah's wave sheaf was always on the day after the 7676 Shabbat, whatever date that may be. Enoch demands that his wave sheaf ceremony must be on a certain date. And that's in opposite to Yahuah's command for a day. Enoch commands a date. That date being the 26th of the first month. Let's see how it plays out. The Enoch calendar claims the wave sheaf must be performed on Abib 26, not on any other date. Therefore, if Enoch follows the Torah guidelines, no grain can be touched until the Abib 26 wave sheaf. I'm going to read that one more time. If Enoch follows the Torah guidelines, no grain can be touched until the Abib 26 wave sheaf. Does this mean that Joshua broke the Torah statute by defiantly eating the grain of the land on Abib 15? Was Joshua really supposed to store a portion of the first batch of dough until Abib 26? Enoch, are you paying attention? And that would be 11 cycles later to honor Enoch's wave sheaf ceremony. And yes, we need to question this. That is the question, a huge discrepancy between Enoch and the scriptures. Number 4.1, divine life of the wave bread, wave sheaf bread. Would it really be acceptable to offer Yahuah bread dough that was 11 days old? That's a pretty interesting picture on the right of all the moldy bread. Or did Joshua perform a second wave sheaf ceremony so there could be acceptable bread? Where would that scripture be? Is there any place in scripture where we find a second wave sheaf offering? I haven't found one myself. And what is with these 11 days? Also, we must remember, Leviticus 23:13, that the oil mixed with flour is a dough, a moist dough. It is not dry bread, moist dough in desert heat. Where do we see scriptural authority for Joshua's actions? Where is it written? And there's 4 witnesses, Leviticus 23, verse 10 to 13, Numbers 15, verses 19 to 21, and Deuteronomy 18, 3 and 4, and chapter 26, 1 and 2. There's where you'll find the witnesses to Joshua's actions. And here's a little bit more review. Israel cleared to eat, and you do not eat bread or roasted grain or fresh grain until the same day that you have brought an offering to your Elohim. See, it's done consecutively on the exact same day. It cannot be divided apart, not according to the scriptures. The wave sheaf statute requirements before eating the grain of the land were accomplished, granting permission for the Israelites to eat the grain of the land on the same day. The very first batch of bread dough. Joshua observed Passover, and that's on Abib 15. The very first batch of bread dough had been presented to Yahuah. That would have been in the morning. Then they ate bread on the same day, the day after the 7676 Shabbat Passover. The wave sheaf had been presented according to statute. There is no provision for a second wave sheaf ceremony according to Torah. Abib 26 is a counterfeit from the Enoch calendar. These scriptures tell us unequivocally that presenting the wave sheaf and eating of the grain of the land must be done consecutively and on the same day. That's exactly what Joshua did on Abib 15. Enoch claims the wave sheaf and eating of the bread is only performed on Abib 26. How can this same day be both Abib 15 and 26? What that amounts to is we're going to have to decide who we're going to follow, either Joshua or Enoch. That's actually what it really boils down to. Remember, Joshua declares by Torah statute, Abib 15 is always the unleavened bread festival. When the wave sheaf is also on Abib 15, the unleavened bread festival is always celebrated after the wave sheaf festival. Cutting grain and baking bread and eating. Joshua's duty, number one, was the wave sheaf. That's the premier duty right there. The wave sheaf was first. Number two, the bread dough from the first grain offering, and then eat bread on Abib 15. Did Joshua ignore the same day clause to align the Hebrew nation with the Enoch calendar? No. The first portion of the cut grain supplied the required offering, allowing the baking and eating on Abib 15, exactly as recorded in the scriptures. Does Enoch's calendar demand that a portion of this first bread dough must be retained for 11 cycles to offer on Abib 26? There is your 11 cycles. That is the difference between Joshua and Enoch, Enoch's calendar. Those are the 11 cycles that we're talking about. Do the scriptures endorse 11-day-old bread? Or will Yahuah accept bread 11 cycles old? 1 Chronicles 9:32 confirms Yahuah's statute of limitations for the sanctuary set-apart bread was 7 cycles. The new showbread was to be prepared every Shabbat to replace the former 7-cycle-old showbread. That's seen in Leviticus 24:8. So there is the limitation that we find in the scriptures, 7 cycles only. And yet it appears like Enoch needed a lot more than 7 cycles. Is it reasonable that Yahuah would accept 11-cycle-old stale and or moldy bread dough as the wave sheaf offering? Remember, Bread dough is moist and very prone to mold in a warm climate. Here's some truth. Enoch rightly places the unleavened bread festival on Abib 15 to 21. Now, the huge Enoch dilemma. Number one, Abib 15 is the last day the manna is given, and you can read that in Joshua 5:12. The second big problem, Enoch always places wave sheaf on Abib 26. In this case, 11 days late. Another problem, number three, according to Torah, the grain of the land cannot be touched for any reason until after the wave sheaf ceremony. Number four, how is Enoch supposed to celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread? And in it, you would be eating unleavened bread from Abib 15 to 21 as one of the statutes. And how would Enoch not be in violation of cutting the grain before the wave sheaf cycle? How can Enoch eat unleavened bread if he was not to touch the grain? Or not to eat it before the wave sheaf festival? How is that supposed to be done? Seems like a pretty extreme contradiction in terms and commands. Number five dilemma. Is Enoch truthfully fulfilling the Torah type in preparation for the antitype, which represents the first heavenly ascension of Yahusha? We're going to look at this a lot closer later on, and we're going to have a look very close. Section number 5. Did Yahusha observe the wave sheaf first fruit requirements according to Enoch calendar stipulations? Here's a very important note. This section will have Abib calendar slides for Joshua, Yahusha, and Enoch. And note this, a similar slide will return at the end of this study, and it will be a conclusive slide. So the answers that you're going to see here in the next few slides, we're going to see together at the end of the study. 1450 BC, Joshua's Passover, 7th cycle. And you see over here, I hope you can see my cursor, there's the 7th day Sabbath, and here is the 14th of Abib. This is where Joshua's Passover was. We come over here, there's the 15th. This is on the first cycle of the week after the 7th day Sabbath. This is the first Shabbat convocation of unleavened bread, and it is also the wave sheaf presentation on the exact same day. Torah dates are flexible. If you have a Passover on a first cycle, the wave sheaf will be on a first cycle. If you have Passover on a second cycle, the wave sheaf will also be on a first cycle. And if you have a Passover on a third cycle, again, we see the wave sheaf on a first cycle. And it continues. It does not matter what cycle of the week the Passover is on, your wave sheaf will always be on a first cycle of the week. So why are these two here? Why are they highlighted? In Moses' Passover in Egypt, the Passover was on the third cycle, and our wave sheaf, the pattern for the wave sheaf, came on the 19th, the first day of the week after the Sabbath. In the crucifixion, you'll see here is the crown of thorns and the cross and the nail. On the crucifixion week, Passover was on the fourth cycle, right here. And yet, Yahusha fulfilled the wave sheaf on the first cycle of the week. It was Abib 18. You need to take note of this. However, every year dating for Enoch's Passover, and you'll notice here, Abib 14, right here in the red, is on the third cycle of the week. Enoch demands that it's on the third cycle of the week each and every year without exception, period. Enoch's dates are not flexible. They are fixed and they do not move from year to year. Passover is always fixed to the third cycle. Wave sheaf is always fixed to Abib 26, the first cycle. He does have the first cycle of the week correct. What is wrong with Abib 26? The wave sheaf is always outside of the week of unleavened bread. So if you go up to here and you'll see my cursor around 21, that is the final day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And where is Abib 26? It's over here. It's outside of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It is a separate identity all on its own. And that is not what the scriptures demand. So let's look at Yahusha's Passover. It was on a fourth cycle, right here. This is the midst of the week. And if you recall creation, it is the midst of the week that was marked with the commissioning of light to the sun and the Matzeroth. It's at the midst of the week. Yahusha marked that, so we knew exactly when the midst of the week is. Here is when the prophecy for Yahusha to be cut off is. It was fulfilled on the midst of the week. Passover is on the 14th. And we go here is your seventh day Sabbath, and there is the first day of the week after the seventh day Sabbath. This is the morning when Yahusha ascended to his Father to present himself as the wave sheaf. And the question I have is, did Joshua fulfill this pattern, or did he abide by Enoch's pattern? And that is for you to go through this one more time after I'm done and figure it out for yourself, so you'll understand that clearly in your own mind. The Torah dates are flexible. Yahusha died on a fourth cycle, not the third. Not the third as Enoch demands. Yahusha's wave sheaf was on Abib 18, not on Abib 26, as Enoch demands, nor was it even on a Sunday, Abib 25. Big discrepancies here. Enoch's Passover, again, is on the third cycle of Abib. There is a problem because this does not set the type. This does not set the pattern that Yahusha fulfilled in his crucifixion week. You look over here on the left, the 14th was on a fourth cycle of the week, right there. Yet Enoch says it's on the third cycle of the week. So there's a problem with prophecy fulfillment here. Somehow prophecy has not been fulfilled. A little bit of review. Enoch's dates are not flexible. Passover is always the third cycle. Wave sheaf is always Abib 26 on the first cycle. And wave sheaf is always outside the Feast of Unleavened Bread, period. On your blue blocks on the side, keep the information on these last two slides in mind for the rest of this section. The resurrection and first fruits view, number 1. After his resurrection on Shabbat, Abib 17th, Yahusha ascended the next dawn, that would be Abib 18, to his Father. He went up to present himself as the wave sheaf. What was his express mission? As Shaul declares in 1 Corinthians 15, 20 and 23, Yahusha HaMashiach is the first fruit offering of the wave sheaf festival. This is always the first cycle after the Shabbat within the full 8-day festival. And that is the example that Joshua gave us when he went into Canaan. Did Yahusha then, on his first ascension to heaven, which was Abib 18, did he request a 9-cycle extension reaching to Abib 26 so he could return back to his father to complete the wave sheaf offering as the first fruits from death per the Enoch calendar? Do we read in Scripture anything about a 9-cycle extension? Do we read anything in Scripture about a second wave sheaf presentation? Myself, I have not seen it yet. Here is the resurrection and first fruits view number 2. If Yahusha did, in fact, ask for a 9-cycle extension so he could observe the wave sheaf offering of the first fruit on Enoch's Abib 26 ceremony, what cycle of the week would that have been? Our answer is coming quickly. Crucifixion, first fruits extension view 2A. It's time for a serious comparison. Did Yahusha request a 9-cycle extension to offer himself as the first fruit from death on Enoch's Abib 26th, a Monday, or a second cycle of the week? See, when you follow the covenant calendar as shown by the Torah, or Covenant Torah, that 26th of Abib would have been the second cycle of the week. That would have been what we call a Monday. So how can we say that Yahusha would have requested a 9-cycle extension so that he could observe Enoch's Abib 26 wave sheaf, and even if it was on a Monday? How could that be? Another controversy with Enoch. Or maybe we should request that Yahusha made it for Abib 25 instead. That would give us a Sunday. But that doesn't agree with Enoch's calendar either. And it certainly doesn't agree with the pattern that Yahusha set. Could Yahusha abide by either a Zadok or Enoch date for his ascension? Absolutely not. Abib 26 was the second morrow in the next week, outside of the unleavened bread festival. So nothing there coincides with the statutes written in the Torah. Nothing at all. It's totally different and totally separate. Who then attempts to give Enoch and Zadok the right to claim that the wave sheaf of first fruits must be on Abib 26? When for 1,500 years, this statute was rehearsed according to Torah so that people would know the prophetic value, yes, prophetic value of this special festival as a very permanent marker for the true Mashiach and his ascension. Every time for 1,500 years when they performed the wave sheaf, it had prophetic value showing when Yahusha was going to ascend to his Father and present himself as the wave sheaf. Was it ever done on Abib 26? Not according to the Scriptures. And Yahusha verified that when he ascended to perform the wave sheaf offering of first fruit on Abib 18, not 26. Why then does Enoch declare Abib 26? For Joshua, his first portion of dough becomes seriously outdated by Abib 26. For Yahusha, fulfilling Enoch's claim for first fruit offering on Abib 26 of the month and the second cycle of the week, which would have been a Monday in pagan terms, is surely breaking the statutes of Yahuah. So if it's breaking the statutes of Yahuah, how can we say that we need to follow Enoch's stipulations, which does not follow the Torah? How does this work? I say we need to follow the Scriptures and the Scriptures only. But that's my personal preference. Yahusha, the perfect first fruit offering. What about Yahusha being the perfect offering of the wave sheaf fulfillment? Yahusha, the perfect first fruit, the victory over death. After his resurrection, Yahusha, in the darkness of the fourth watch, restricted Mary Magdalene from touching him when they met. Yahusha could not be defiled by a human prior to presenting himself to Yahuah as the first fruit offering, the perfect, ultimate sacrifice to fulfill the wave sheaf feast offering. Was Yahusha really a perfect wave sheaf offering? That would be not contaminated by humans? Yes, perfection is important to Yahuah. Let's read about it. And on that day, when you wave the sheaf, you shall prepare a male lamb 1 year old, a perfect one. That means flawless in each and every way, without exception. A perfect one as a burnt offering to Yahuah. That is a second witness. Question. Where in the scriptures do we find that Yahusha took specific action to preserve himself as the pure first fruit offering for the wave sheaf presentation? If a human had touched, as in contaminated, Yahusha, prior to presenting himself as the perfect sacrifice, then, number one, he would have been disqualified as the perfect sacrifice. Number two, then, Yahusha would have failed Yahuah's plan of salvation. Number three, then Yahusha would no longer qualify as the Mashiach. Number four, then consequently, by default, upon the tree, when Yahusha declared, "It has been accomplished," that would have been a total falsehood if he had been contaminated. And if he had been contaminated, he would have been disqualified. That means we would not have a Mashiach and we would have no salvation. Note, Yahusha fulfilled the first fruit offering for wave sheaf at early dawn. He returned from his presentation before Yahuah. He then readily accepted the adoration and worship of his followers, willingly accepting their touch. See in Mark 16:2, the ladies with their spices came at sunrise to visit the tomb. Matthew 28:9, the ladies departed after hearing the good news from the angel that Yahusha had risen. Now let's read about when he welcomed them. Matthew 28:9, and as they were going to report to his taught ones, see, Yahusha met them, saying, "Greetings." And they came and held him by the feet and did bow to him. There is the human touch that he welcomed. After returning from the courts of heaven, Yahusha could now accept physical contact from his children. What divine event had occurred allowing him human touch? Had Yahusha already presented himself in the courts of heaven to Yahuah as the pure first fruit offering, fulfilling the antitype wave sheaf statute? Is that the divine event that allowed human touch afterwards, when he readily accepted them and was eager that they touch him? Remember Thomas? He invited him to touch him. Recall this. The date of the first cycle of the week after his resurrection was Abib 18. Zadok and Enoch. Are you paying attention? What would be the situation with Enoch and Zadok, Abib 26? At this point of Abib 18, with Yahusha being contaminated by human touch, that's when he invited them to touch him, when he greeted them saying, "Welcome, greetings." He would then have been contaminated by the human touch. He would still have 9 cycles to complete before fulfilling the Zadok proclaimed wave sheaf, the festival of the first fruit offering on Abib 26. 9 more cycles. Question. As Yahusha did not find it acceptable to be contaminated by human touch before performing the scriptural first fruit offering on Abib 18, who then could possibly have qualified as the pure first fruit offering on Enoch's Abib 26 wave sheaf festival? If Yahusha had already been contaminated, who could fill his place? Enoch? Zadok? I don't think so. They were not deity. They could not even come close to replacing the Mashiach. Remember, no pure offering, no Mashiach. Our Mashiach was flawless. No Mashiach, no salvation. Zadok, are you paying attention? Also, ponder this. When Yahusha mingled with society after his resurrection in the 9 extra days leading up to Enoch's Abib 26 wave sheaf festival, is it even possible that Yahusha could have remained uncontaminated? What about those 9 extra days leading to Enoch's Abib 26? I think that would be a great problem when Yahusha had already greeted them and asked them to touch him. Could it be Lucifer, the father of lies, is promoting these evil Zadok, Enoch calendar deceptions to disqualify our salvation? Is following the Torah perfectly and completely a salvational issue? Oh, how many times have I heard this when speaking about calendar? Is it a salvational issue? So many times I've heard this. Summary questions for section number 5. Can Zadok justify from the scriptures separating the eating of the first bread dough from the waving action of the first fruit wave sheaf offering on the same day? That's that word etzem. That is the bone structure. How can Zadok or Enoch separate the eating of the first bread dough from the waving action of the first fruit offering? Can it be? That is something you need to study for yourself and decide for your own. Can Zadok justify from the scriptures using 11-day-old bread dough as an offering to Yahuah? That is, if it was not moldy, stale, and dried up yet? Can Zadok justify from the scriptures how it is that Yahusha could observe the wave sheaf day on the second cycle of the week? Did not scriptures demand that the wave sheaf was to be on the day after the 7th-day Sabbath? How come now it's on the second cycle of the week? How does that work? More summary questions for section 5. Can Zadok justify breaking the statutes by using the grain to feed the Israelite nation for 11 cycles until Abib 26? Why? By reason of the manna ceasing the day after the Passover, and the fruit and the vegetables had only started to grow. So where did Enoch and Zadok get food when they were told that they could not touch the grain of the land, any grain of any kind, until after the wave sheaf had been performed? Those 11 cycles from that time when Joshua ate the grain of the land till Abib 26, the Israelite nation would have been very, very hungry. Can Zadok justify breaking the statutes by using the grain of the land to fulfill the statute for eating unleavened bread during the festival from Abib 15 to 21? Can he do that? Is that acceptable? A question for Enoch and Zadok. Does Yahuah accept breaking his statutes to fulfill a counterfeit one? Where is that scale going to go? At one side of that scale is going to dip really low, because Yahuah does not accept breaking of his statutes of any kind in any situation. And now for the final and brutally important Enoch discrepancy of part number 2. Number 6. The greatest challenge of all for Enoch and Zadok's huge scriptural challenges. Can they find a fully qualified, of the first year, perfect first fruit offering to legally present to Yahuah on a non-scriptural Abib 26? I want you to think about that very, very carefully. I'm going to read that one more time. The greatest challenge of all for Enoch and Zadok's huge scriptural challenges. Can they find a fully qualified, of the first year, perfect first fruit offering to legally present to Yahuah on a non-scriptural Abib 26? There's something severely wrong with this picture. Are there any candidates? Enoch, Zadok? Let's revisit the slide calendars one more time. This is not going to be a review at this moment. Let's pick up some facts between Enoch and the Covenant Torah calendar witnesses. Here is a summary. Enoch does not recognize a Sabbath or a fourth cycle Passover. He does not accept that, and that is what is written in the scriptures. However, Enoch declares he's above that. Enoch does not accept the wave sheaf observances for Moshe on the 19th, for Joshua on the 15th, or for Yahusha on Abib 18th. Enoch does not accept these things that are written in the scriptures. Enoch's wave sheaf is never inside the week of unleavened bread. So why is it that Joshua's example makes absolutely certain that we understand the wave sheaf being inside the feast of unleavened bread? That is the example that Joshua has given us. Here's some interesting pictures. Right down in the middle there, we have a shattered set of 10 commandments. Enoch is without Torah. Enoch cannot accept the wave sheaf being on the 19th. Enoch cannot accept the wave sheaf being on the 18th in the crucifixion week. So neither the Passover in Egypt nor the crucifixion week, Enoch cannot accept those examples. He dictates otherwise. Who are we going to follow? Are we going to follow the scriptures, or are we going to follow Enoch? The proverb, 3 strikes and you're out. Evidence declares Enoch has at least 6 strikes, and that is thus far at this point. Question, Enoch, is this Torah-lessness? Answer, Enoch, Zadok, and the other 364 affiliates, you are not within the guidelines of Covenant Torah. Torah judges you as practicing Torah-lessness. That is what I would call an abomination by scriptural definition. Enoch, Zadok, your errors are being exposed. You simply cannot recognize or declare the true Melchizedek Mashiach. There are many more errors in Enoch's calendar. Some of the areas to be discussed in part 3 are, number 1, does the Omer count begin on Abib 15th or 26th? We've looked at that a little bit this time, but we're going to look at it more in part 3 from a different view. Number 2, the harvest on Abib 15? Is it barley or is it wheat? Actually, I'm going to back that up. I'm going to read that one more time. The harvest on Abib 15, is it barley or is it wheat? And what will this do to the barley green calendar? We're going to be looking at this from Joshua's point of view. Number 3, what is Enoch's real reason for adhering to Abib 26 and his calendar counting error? Is there a real reason that we have not mentioned yet? Why is it that Enoch demands Abib 26? Yes, there is how can I word this? What Enoch defines as a scriptural reason, and we're going to look at it and see if the context is correct or if the context has been confused and if it's taken out of context. We're going to define that very, very carefully in part 3. Will Enoch find justification without errors? Would Enoch have made these mistakes if he had studied Joshua's testimony? Wait a minute, but I'm told Enoch came long before Joshua. It appears right now that maybe Enoch didn't even look at Joshua's testimony. So maybe Enoch is long after Joshua. Is that what's documented in historic writings? I'll leave that one be for the moment. We'll look at it later, and we shall see. Questions, answers, comments? Let's have them. And thank you for your time. I'm going to pull out of the sharing. There we go.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Very welcome.
That was extremely detailed. I was a bit confused in the beginning. There were some things that I just didn't get a hold of. Stacy, you have your hand up first, so let's go ahead with some questions.
Okay, I wrote them down. I'm like you, Mario. I was really squinting in the beginning. Okay, so this might be a dumb question. Why does Passover fluctuate if it's in the midst of the week? I'm not grasping that.
There's only one time that Passover was prophesied for the midst of the week, and that is the week that Yahushua died.
Okay.
That's the only time that Passover must be in the midst of the week. Other than that, Passover can be in any day of the week. It does not matter.
Okay.
But the crucifixion week, Abib 14, must be in the midst of the week.
Okay, got it. That makes sense.
And it'll be pretty much, you can kind of tell when it's going to be next year, because if, like, for example, this year it was in the midst of the week on a Wednesday, next year it'll probably be on a Thursday, and the year after that it'll be on a Friday, and year after that be on a Sunday, and so.
And it all starts from the first day of the year. That's how we know where to count.
We count and number our days by the first day of the year, starting with the vernal equinox, and then we count out the numbers. So the 14th can land on whatever day.
Okay. Okay. Good. That makes sense. Okay. Now, second part. On Passover in particular, it's in the midst of the week on the 14th. The manna ceased on the 15th, and the first fruits wave sheaf was on the 18th. No?
The manna ceased on the 16th. Joshua observed Passover on the seventh day Sabbath. That was Abib 14. Mm-hmm. He observed the wave sheaf and ate the grain of the land on Abib 15. That's the first day of the week. And the Joshua 5:8, I think it says. And on the day after he ate of the grain of the land is when the manna ceased. So that is Abib 16 that the manna ceased. How did it cease? It just didn't show up.
So what I'm confused is with Yahushua's Passover. I've got Joshua's, but Yahushua's Passover is confusing me because
So yeah, on Yahusha's Passover, it would first fruits would have been on the 18th.
So what did they eat? Where in that gap of time, if there was like from the 14th, the manna would have stopped. And I know I'm thinking of Joshua as a picture going forward. So what's the deal with the 15th, 16th, and the 17th? That gap in time as far as before the grain was offered, or with Yahusha's that stopped? With Yahusha's Passover, did that stop?
Yeah,
The only time that they were commanded that they could not eat the grain of the land was for the first year, the first time when Joshua entered into Canaan. That is the only time they could not eat the grain of the land until the wave sheaf had been presented.
Okay.
All other times after that, had nothing to do with it.
Okay, so Joshua's only.
That's because it landed on a Shabbat.
Okay. All right.
So
that makes sense. I had gotten that a little bit confused, but it makes sense now.
yeah, I think Joshua's lot he's marking out two things when they entered into the land, and that it happened to be on Passover.
True.
So
It's a very, very detailed study, and it's very hard to present all the details it's hard to present one detail without going on 35 rabbit trails to explain it all. It's a serious, hard thing to do. So my advice, my advice is please go back and study it yourself at your convenience when you press the button, and you can go step by step or you can back up.
Okay.
It's so important to go over it again.
Okay. It makes sense now. I was trying to make them all the same, and I get it now.
okay, praise Yah, hallelujah. And then we have Frank and Daisy's hand is raised, and Charlene, did you want to comment before or after?
I'll just go right away because it's for Stacy. What I saw happening, Stacy, is you're mixing up the calendars. So the calendar for Joshua is very different than Enoch's, and it's very different than Yahusha's. So what was happening on Yahusha's calendar for the dates, that's why we had that calendar slide that said there's a difference between a date and a day. Okay? The 15th day of the month is not always on a certain day of the week. It can fluctuate. So when you're looking, you have to stick within the calendar that we're talking about. You can't ask a Passover question on Joshua's calendar and then ask why the wave sheaf on Yahusha's was on a different date. Okay, so
that's exactly what I was doing. So
yeah.
Okay.
That's why we tried to show the calendar months, each one, and I know maybe we should have let you go a little bit slower just to see that the 14th was on a Sabbath, and then the 14th was on a Tuesday for Moses, and the 14th was on a Wednesday for Yahusha.
Yeah. What just confused me there just now, Charlene, when you said on Joshua's calendar, that kind of threw me just now.
Yes.
I don't see.
It's the same.
Well, the calendar that.
Yeah, it's the same calendar, but she's talking about Joshua's year.
Oh.
Joshua's year and Yahusha's year, the crucifixion, and Moshe's year in Egypt. The same calendar, but different years.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Or different configurations is what it amounts to.
Okay, that just threw me off for a sec. Thank you.
Well, that's good. We need to keep that lingo clear.
Frank and Daisy? You have your hand up there.
Hi.
Hello. Shalom, shalom.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Shalom. Back to the question that Stacy had. I'm kind of riding on the same boat for now. I understand that there are 3 perceptions here on the Passover timing. One for Moses, one for Joshua, and one for Yeshua. My question is, when you're looking at the wave sheaf offering from a covenant count perspective, which is the perspective that supersedes all the others as far as the wave sheaf? Meaning, would the wave sheaf be counted as needing to be on the 15th, or would it be counted as needing to be on the first day of the week?
Yeah.
The statutes in the Torah take preeminence always, and that statute demands that the wave sheaf is on the first day of the week after the seventh day Sabbath. So there's not a year which gives authority to any others. It's the statutes that declare when it is, and each and every year has to fall within and under those statutes in complete fulfillment.
Okay. So then Joshua's year was extraordinary because the 15th happened to also be the first day of the week.
Yes, and we feel that that story was explicitly recorded in the scriptures for an extremely important reason, because we are not to allow the wave sheaf to go outside of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And being that is the first year in Canaan when they observe the feasts, and Joshua, being who he is the type of the Mashiach. Well, he must lead things out in an absolute perfection way according to the statutes. And so we feel that example in Joshua is brutally important.
Great questions and great answers. Thank you, Daisy.
Okay, so that clarifies everything, because in my head, I got mixed up with the 15th versus the first day of the week. And then there's this other calendar that Yeshua, and now, okay, so knowing that wave sheaf offering has to stay within the boundaries of unleavened bread, and it has to also be on the first day of the week after the first Shabbat, explains why Joshua's year looks so strange.
Yes,
because,
you got it.
Okay, all right, understood. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Charlene?
But there's one more thing to that, Daisy, and that's why the Joshua study is so important, and we have it in our major Joshua study. Because Joshua has wave sheaf on the 15th, that completely knocks out wave sheaf being on the 16th day of the first month, which is what most of the feast-keeping congregations are doing. They're using Passover on the 14th, unleavened bread on the 15th, the first day of unleavened bread on the 15th, and then they follow it with first fruits on Abib 16. No matter what, that's the rules, end of story. But this Joshua study shows you that wave sheaf is not married to a date, Abib 16, just like Enoch has married wave sheaf to August, Abib 26. Joshua is showing that wave sheaf is not married to a date. It's married to the first day of the week, like you said, after the Shabbat within the Passover festival.
And it's also sad too, my understanding is that on the Enoch calendar, they don't begin the counting on the first day after the equinox either, that they have to wait till the following Wednesday to even begin the count. I mean, that's, I don't know where that comes from, but is that a correct understanding, those of you that know more about Enoch than I do?
By studying,
well, Mario, that comes from, remember we showed the slide where they say that the week has to start on the fourth cycle of the week. That's the major teaching. There are other teachings now, but this is the most popular one, where they say that the first month has to start on the fourth cycle. It's a rule. Don't know where they got the rule from, but if you remember, we showed that slide last time. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, my understanding from the study I have seen on this topic is that the year resets every year to start on the fourth cycle of the week, according to the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is Enoch and Zadok. Now, how that works, I don't understand how they can declare that, because there will inevitably be a week that it is not fulfilled, that does not have a seventh-day Sabbath to fulfill it, to complete it. It's inevitable at the end of the year.
Good question. Anybody? Yeah, Frank and Daisy, have your hand up again. Were you done, Tim? I'm sorry. Yeah. Frank, Daisy?
This is good because this clarified and shows how we kind of arbitrarily just take it for common knowledge that these Passovers, you know, everybody had them on the same way, in the same day, in the same year. But it really shows, when you put those calendars up there, it shows how different they were, from Moses to Joshua to Yeshua. That you know, the way the days fell is what I'm saying. The way the days, you know, marked off on the counts and the cycle is very, very interesting. And another thing is, as far as the Enoch and Zadok thing, I do know that some of the Enoch people in the Midwest, they actually add a week every 3 years to their calendar.
Yeah, that's another exposure of a counterfeit. If you look in 1 Colossians chapter 27, pretty much all of the calendars out there add a extra month, a 13th month, what they call an Adar bet in their calendars, which that is evidence that it's a false calendar, because Abba created captains over each of the 12 months. There wasn't a 13th month in there. And then they use one passage in Ezekiel that says that Ezekiel laid on this side this many days for Judah and this many days for Israel, and that somehow has something to do with the calendar. And so with all these Mickey Mouse math, you can prove that there was a 31-day month in Ezekiel. But if you add those numbers together, the numerical value of laying on each of those sides, each of it, or his side for each of the houses, the numerical value is for the redemption shekel. So it's about their redemption, not about it. It has nothing to do with a calendar anywhere. So yeah, 13th month is a dead giveaway. But yeah, Charlene, is your hand raised?
Yeah, Mario, that's a really good point. You know, while we kind of pass a judgment on the calendars that are using the moon month, that they have to intercalate at a 13th month every 3 years, let's not forget that Enoch is doing the same thing, only they're intercalating a week. And, you know, it really is no different. They've got the same problems as the other counterfeit calendars do, but yet at the same time, it is one of the closest counterfeits to Covenant Torah calendar.
Good point. Yeah,
It's also interesting that the Julian calendar has to intercalate 1 week every 3 years also.
So, is it, yeah, right. So is it, what makes it a close-looking counterfeit? Is it because they recognize at the beginning of the year using the spring equinox? Is that what makes it look?
I believe that's what triggers people to start to look at it. And I'm going to say something, I'm going to be very, very frank. I believe Enoch is there for people that have no interest in studying the scriptures, because it takes willpower, it takes determination and time and discipline to search the scriptures. Enoch has it all laid out. Just bing, 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 bing there. It's mathematically phenomenal. Only trouble is, when you study the scriptures, it doesn't line up anywhere close to the scriptures.